So in my third session with the game, the first session of the game, I was pretty underwhelmed. Found the combat wasn't as challenging or as engaging as I thought it should be. What else? Really wasn't all that scary. The story was kind of, it was unraveling its mysteries, but I knew it was going to be one of those ones that was very sort of fantastical and hard for me to connect with. I like a more grounded story, or I like a story that has to do with how people feel. I like crazy sci-fi, but it generally has to do with things that are grounded in a way. You know, I like Star Trek in the sense that there is a little bit of truth there that they expand upon that kind of holds it all together. Or here's a crazy scenario, but how do people feel? I don't really know how people feel about anything in this game other than just seeing crazy things. And there's a fog somewhere that is causing this to happen. Will the revelation provide any kind of satisfaction to them to say, the fog was coming from what? I don't know. I don't know what it could be coming from that is going to be really satisfying. People in general, and this is what we've learned as a people. I don't know. Maybe it's a North American fallacy for me to think that everything needs to be tied up in a nice bow and be something you can relate to. Maybe it's just more like Japanese storytelling. That is not quite my bag. Anyways, the second session I had in the previous episode when I was talking about this, man, I loved it. I really clicked in with the side quests. I found it very, very charming. I enjoyed doing the upgrades. The combat was flashy enough. And there's enough of an arc and things going on that I enjoyed myself. This session, I found it really getting repetitive. And I found it... walking around and sucking down these blue spirits was pretty repetitive and pretty slow. It didn't feel like there was enough progression from that. The combat was okay. It had been the same for quite a long time. I think the most interesting thing you can do with the combat is try to time it so that when you hit these enemies enough times so that their core is exposed and you can do as many of them as you have exposed at once, you can do. So if you can stun the enemies and have 4 of them stunned, and then you can do the suck button or whatever it is, and you suck all 4 of them at one time. It's really, really satisfying. Kind of feels like doing a 4-line clear in Tetris. Because you have to time it, because after a certain time, they'll come out of that, and then if you hit them again, they won't go into a stunned state, they'll be finished. And that remained pretty satisfying. Not super compelling, not very difficult. There were no difficult bosses in this game. Like I said a million times while playing it, I'm playing on the normal difficulty. Generally, I don't like to play games on hard because they tend to just turn the enemies into bullet sponges. And sometimes that works in changing the experience. I've heard that with Devil May Cry, and that you have to play it on hard if you really want the full experience, because you're actually going to get a real challenge. And it makes the battle systems sort of come to life. Anyways, what I find this game lacks is tension. The enemies always show up on the radar. So when you're walking around in a spooky area, you're never worried that an enemy's going to come out and hit you, because the enemies aren't very dangerous. And they, like you can see in the radar on the screen, sorry if you're on the podcast. If you're on the podcast, there are these, it just always shows you exactly what direction they're coming from. And when you're near an enemy, your character will lift up his hand and go into a sort of a combat mode. So you're always being warned of enemies. So they're not taking advantage of the spookiness of these situations. The music is doing a great job of making it feel mysterious and a bit scary, but the enemies never do. It always ends up kind of feeling sort of goofy and just sort of, your character seems so powerful. It's like you're Superman in Batman's world. You have the ability to just easily dispatch everybody, but you're creeping around in a mysterious world. So it doesn't really work like that. Just as it was getting quite tedious, there was a really, really exciting set piece, similar to, I don't want to spoil anything, but it was a really kind of psychedelic set piece that really, really took advantage of what you can do in video games. Video games, when you try to do something in a TV show or a movie, You have to pay somebody to animate it, and it has to look realistic. And if you're doing it with live action actors, you have to make sure the green screen looks good or the blue screen. You have to make sure all the CGI meshes well and doesn't immediately look fake after you've been staring at, say, Tom Holland's face for 2 hours. Once you see something not real, there's that uncanny valley. In a video game, everything is always the same in the sense that there's not the uncanny valley. Whatever they do is not going to feel like unrealistic because it's all made from the same visuals, right? So I feel like video games should try to take advantage of that more, that feeling of the players controlling something, and you can put them in a place anywhere. You can have things fold in on themselves. You can go through time and space. You can change, you can add crazy filters. You can just, filters is like what you could do on a movie camera. Like you could really, the possibilities are almost endless. And I feel like games should try to take more advantage of that. And this one here really doesn't take a lot of advantage of it. And it should, because it's a spooky thriller kind of mind trippy game, but it just doesn't do it enough. The times that it did were fantastic. And for a short game, I just wish that it would have been, I just wish it would have done a little bit more, you know. It would have been, take more advantage of that, have more set pieces, because while I had a great time with all the side quests and stuff last session, this one, it was really wearing on me, so it needed more of that. Also, man, I just can't help but think how damn good this would have been in VR, because everything would be working in its favor. The tourism of Japan would have been better, the spookiness of it, the atmosphere, the combat would have worked perfectly with 2 motion-controlled hand controllers. I never say that. It goes from making, because in VR, it's okay if the combat is not as difficult, because it's a lot easier when you have auto aim with a dual stick controller if you're on a PC aiming with a mouse. But to have these creepy enemies slowly walking toward you and using VR, this would have been great. To be able to fly around the city would have been great. It would have taken the stuff that was kind of spooky, maybe made it really scary and really immersive. So I don't know if that's possible, but it feels like a missed opportunity and something I really would have wanted to see. After my first session with it, I felt like I was kind of done with it. The second, I was really excited to get back to it. And now after this third one again, I feel like I'm done. I probably will get back to it again tomorrow just to finish it off. I feel like I'm getting pretty close to the end of it. And things have opened up a little bit more. And at this point, I'm pretty invested in just seeing it through to the end and seeing how I feel, just to be able to properly recommend it to people. Because at this point, I would recommend this on sale or through Game Pass. I don't think, unless you really are liking what you're hearing and seeing. The combat is just, it's flashy, but it becomes tedious because there's not enough variety in the enemies and there's not enough challenge. It's interesting to do, but it's pretty samey. You don't really have to vary up your strategies too much, other than the fact that you quickly run out of ammo and you have to be bouncing around to get more ammo. That's the part that keeps me engaged with it. The exploration. I keep, in this session I kept describing it as a word search, because there's one section where you're trapped. There's a barrier. There's a time limit. You have to find 4 pieces in before the time comes down. But it was very simple, and you end up just kind of walking around the area, pressing the Witcher vision button until you see it, and then you shoot it. There's no clues. There's no brain power. It's just roam around and eventually find it. And if that's your thing, then there's a lot of that. If you don't really want to be super challenged by the game, if you want more of a passive experience, then this is it. There's a lot to see, and they're going to hold your hand, and they're going to show you everything you need to do at all times. And the most you're really going to need to do is just roam around the area that they tell you to until the thing appears. I personally like stuff that's a bit more, that demands a little bit more from the player. It doesn't have to be super difficult. I like I would be happy if the game, for example, gave me a riddle about what room it would be in, and then you'd have to go, oh, that sounds like the bathroom. And there's maybe 10 rooms. So yeah, you could search them all, but if they gave you a clue, that'd be nice. You have the ability to talk to these dogs and these cats, and there's one line of dialogue from a cat where it says, humans always lose things in that room with the spinny things. You think, it's probably a laundromat. Wouldn't that be cool if you looked around and you found a laundromat? Or if you saw a sign for a laundromat and it was a bit off the beaten path and you found like a really cool stash of things? I like stuff like that, and I feel like this game just doesn't take advantage of it enough. It's a very pleasant looking game and sounding game. It doesn't really do anything super wrong, but it does feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities. For example, you go into the bathroom and there'll be 3 bathroom stalls and you can open all 3 doors. And there's almost never anything in one of these bathroom stalls. There's often a lot of places when you're searching, drawers you can open, shelves you can open, and almost nothing to find other than the usual stuff. There's these main items, these black covered in goo items that you hit and they give you different currency, whether it's money or whether it's energy or ammunition. And there's little money things around, but you never find too much. You don't find too much personality. You don't find a lot of little stories. Most of the game is going and talking to spirits, and they have an issue. One of them says, I feel like my building is cursed, my office building, because everybody leaves. The employees always leave. And then you go and you find 3 or 4 little pieces of paper, and there's 1 page of employees complaining about the job. And then you go tell him, and they go, okay, that's why. I'm free. And then they leave. And it's really barely a story. It's very flat. There's just more you can do. I mean, when you look at games like Deus Ex, Prey, BioShock, finding these little micro stories and searching through computers and finding notes, there's really so much more you can do. Audio logs, you can have more of an arc. You can have more depth to it. There's a lot of it, but it's very, very shallow. So, and it just requires very little thought. So for somebody that, I want more of an engaging, demanding game, and maybe I'm just an old school gamer, I guess, then this really is not going to have a lot for you. If you just really love passive hand-holding, I'm trying not to say this in a condescending way, because I've read reviews where people call this a 10 out of 10 and they just couldn't get enough of it. The strength of the game is that if you do like what's here, that's all there is, and there's a lot of it. So if you are okay with it not really asking much of you, you just want a game that is fairly pleasant to go through. But even still, I mean, I could think of other games like Ratchet and Clank, where this is not a very demanding game, but what's there is just so it's just so tailored. There's just so many moments in those games where I think you need more set pieces, is what this game really needed. Or it needed deeper stories. If you're not going to have the player have to be challenged to figure things out, and you're just mostly going to be telling the story at the player, then really I think you could have done a lot better and provided more stories, more atmosphere. So I'll be back after our next session with another Too Long Didn't Watch. This is a new series I'm going to be doing after each stream. Too Long Didn't Watch. It's going to be on our A 90s Kid podcast, A90SKID, available wherever you get podcasts. It's going to be on our YouTube channel. I'm going to finish off each stream, so if you don't feel like watching the big streams, but you want to know what the game is about, this is a summary of that. It's also a review and progress of the game. I'm putting this game at a 6 or a 7, which I don't really care about numbers. This is a game for if you like a non-demanding, if you like a very casual, pleasant exploration collectathon with a bit of spookiness, but a lot of Japanese culture, and you can put up with it being a bit tedious, then this game could be for you. If you demand a bit more, I wouldn't bother unless it was on sale or on Game Pass. That's it for now. Bye.